All right, let's turn to Hebrews chapter 9. I know Hebrews is not in the Old Testament, but we're going to be in the Old Testament. But sometimes, like I said, I've said this often during this journey through the Old Testament, we can take for granted that we know when the New Testament mentions something that we know where that thing came from. And here's one of the instances that is the case. Hebrews chapter 9, the author of Hebrews is talking about the tabernacle and how it was a shadow or type of the real tabernacle in heaven. But let's go ahead and read first 4 verses or so. Now, even the first covenant had regulations for worship and an earthly place of holiness. For a tent was prepared, the first section in which there was the lampstand and the table and the bread of the presence. It is called the holy place. Behind the second curtain was the second section called the most holy place, having the golden altar of incense and the ark of the covenant covered on all sides with gold, in which was a golden urn holding the manna and Aaron's staff that budded and the tablets of the covenant. Above it were the cherubim of the glory overshadowing the mercy seat. Of these things we cannot now speak in detail. So we have already talked about 2 of the objects that are in the Ark of the Covenant, that were in the Ark of the Covenant. God had told them to take a pot of manna and put that in the Ark of the Covenant, and it would keep in the Ark of the Covenant, and it was there to be a remembrance of them when God provided for them throughout their journey in the wilderness. It was to be a testimony for all time that God had provided the manna to the children of Israel. Secondly, the tablets of the covenant, the law, the 10 commandments. Those 2 stone tablets that after Moses broke them, and then God told him to make some more, to cut out some more stones, and then chisel these things on there. That was placed in the Ark of the Covenant. And then it says, and Aaron's rod that budded. So we tend to skip over Aaron's rod that budded, but Aaron's rod that budded is a very important thing. Okay? So let's turn to the story of Aaron's rod that budded, and why did it bud? Chapter 16 of the book of Numbers. Now Korah, the son of Ishar, son of Kohath, son of Levi, and Dathan, and Abiram, the sons of Eliab, and on the son of Peleth, the sons of Reuben, took men, and they rose up before Moses with a number of the people of Israel, 250 chiefs of the congregation, chosen from the assembly, well-known men. So this is again another rebellion that the people bring against God and Moses. And this time, this one is driven by jealousy, is what we're going to see. So Korah, he's a Levi, right? And then we have Dathan and Abiram and On, the son of Peleth, sons of Reuben. They all took men, and they rose up before Moses with a number of the people of Israel, 250 chiefs of the congregation, chosen from the assembly, well-known men. They assembled themselves together against Moses and against Aaron, and said to them, you have gone too far. This is following God revealing to them that the Levites, Aaron's family was going to be the priest. The rest of the rest of the tribe of Levites were going to serve in the temple courts, but the only priests were going to come through Aaron. Okay? They get jealous. You have gone too far, for all in the congregation are holy, and every one of them, and the Lord is among them. Why then do you exalt yourself above the assembly of the Lord? When Moses heard it, he fell on his face, and he said to Korah and all his company, in the morning the Lord will show who is his and who is holy, and will bring him near to him. The one whom he chooses he will bring near to him. Do this, take censers, Korah and all his company, put fire in them, put incense on them before the Lord tomorrow, and the man whom the Lord chooses shall be the holy one. You have gone too far, sons of Levi. And Moses said to Korah, hear now, you sons of Levi, is it too small a thing for you that God of Israel has separated you from the congregation of Israel to bring you near to himself, to do service in the tabernacle of the Lord, and to stand before the congregation to minister to them? And that he has brought you near to him, and all your brothers, the sons of Levi, with you? And would you seek the priesthood also? Therefore it is against the Lord that you and all your company have gathered together. What is Aaron that you grumble against him? In other words, Moses is saying, look, God has separated you people. Is it a small thing that God has separated the tribe of Levi to be ministers in the tabernacle, to be ministers to the people, to draw near to himself? The tribe of Levi, God has taken, if you go back and read it, God has taken the tribe of Levi in place of the firstborn. Part of the law was the firstborn must be dedicated to God, must be redeemed. In other words, this is why when Jesus is born, we find Mary and Joseph going to the temple to redeem the firstborn child with an offering. They offer the poor person's offering, which was a turtle dove, right? They could offer a turtle dove. If you could afford it, you were to bring a lamb and redeem the firstborn with a lamb. Otherwise, God was not going to be pleased with you because the firstborn was his. This is part of the covenant, the Abrahamic covenant. I mean, the covenant of the law, the Mosaic covenant. Part of that was that they had to redeem the firstborn. So the firstborn child, the firstborn animal, they had to redeem it. And that's what Mary and Joseph are doing when they go to the temple to redeem their firstborn child by offering, it's the poor person's offering, the offering of the turtle dove. But what Moses is saying is, look, God has chosen the tribe of Levi to be the stand-in for all of the firstborn of the nation of Israel. He has brought you close to himself. He has chosen the tribe of Levi to serve in the tabernacle, to serve the people, to minister to the people, to be closer to him than any other tribe. And yet you're jealous and you want to have the priesthood also. God has chosen Aaron. Through the priesthood is going to be coming through Aaron's loins and only Aaron's loins. But now you want the priesthood too. You have gone too far, you sons of. In other words, you're not recognizing the great honor that God has given you by pulling you out from the rest of the tribes, and you still want more. You're fighting against the sovereignty of God. God has sovereignly chose Aaron, right? But they were jealous because Moses is Aaron's younger brother. So it's like Aaron and Moses are setting themselves up as kings and princes, which is what they say. In verse 12, and Moses sent to call Dathan and Abiram and the sons of Eliab, and they said, we will not come up. Is it a small thing that you have brought us up out of a land flowing with milk and honey to kill us in the wilderness, that you must also make yourself a prince over us? Again, that same accusation. You brought us up out of Egypt where we had it made. We had everything. It was a land of milk and honey. When the reality was they were slaves in Egypt. It might have been a land of milk and honey, but you weren't seeing any of it. You were being oppressed by Pharaoh. But yet you've painted this picture of life in Egypt as this idyllic situation when in reality you were slaves and God redeemed you. But again, they're not trusting that God has brought them out. You brought us out here to kill us in the desert, and you're not just going to kill us in the desert. You're going to set yourself up as a prince over us. Moreover, you have not brought us into a land flowing with milk and honey, nor given us inheritance of the fields and vineyards. Will you put out the eyes of those men? We will not come up. All right, we just talked about last week why the children of Israel wandered in the wilderness for 40 years, right? Here, just very shortly after that episode, they're saying, well, you didn't bring us into the promised land. Well, whose fault was it we didn't go to the promised land? It's these very people's fault. Moses was ready. Joshua was ready. Aaron was ready. Caleb was ready. It was the people who said, no, we're not going. And God said, okay, none of you are going. But here the accusation is placed upon Moses. Verse 15, and Moses was very angry and said to the Lord, do not respect their offering. I have not taken one donkey from them, and I have not harmed one of them. In other words, I'm not oppressing them like they're accusing me of doing. I hadn't taken anything from them. And Moses said to Korah, be present, you and all your company, before the Lord, you and they and Aaron tomorrow. And let every one of you take his censer and put incense on it. And every one of you bring before the Lord his censer, 250 censers. You also and Aaron each his censer. So every man took his censer and put fire in them and laid incense on them and stood at the entrance of the tent of meeting with Moses and Aaron. Then Korah assembled all the congregation against them at the entrance to the tent of meeting, and the glory of the Lord appeared to all the congregation, just like it did last time when they rebelled, when the spies came. And the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, Separate yourself from among this congregation, that I may consume them in a moment. And they fell on their faces and said, O God, the God of the spirits of all flesh, shall one man sin, and you will be angry with all the congregation? Again, Moses and Aaron, even though they're the ones who are being wronged, and Moses is very angry, they're once again interceding for the sinful nation of Israel, the very ones who are rebelling against them. And the Lord said to Moses, verse 23, and the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Say to the congregation, Get away from the dwellings of Korah and Dathan and Abiram. So God relents from destroying the nation of Israel and is only going to go after the ringleaders. Then Moses arose and went to Dathan and Abiram, and the elders of Israel followed him, and he spoke to the congregation, saying, Depart, please, from the tents of these wicked men, and touch nothing of theirs, lest you be swept away with all their sins. So they got away from the dwelling of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram, and Dathan and Abiram came out and stood at the door of their tents, together with their wives, their sons, and their little ones. And Moses said, Hereby you shall know that the Lord has sent me to do all these works, and it has not been of my own accord. If these men die as all men die, or if they are visited by the fate of all mankind, then the Lord has not sent me. But if the Lord creates something new, and the ground opens its mouth and swallows them up, with all that belongs to them, and they go down alive into Sheol, then you shall know that these men have despised the Lord. And as soon as he had finished speaking all these words, the ground under them split apart, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed them up, with their households and all the people who belonged to Korah, and all their goods. So they and all that belonged to them went down alive into Sheol, and the earth closed over them, and they perished from the midst of the assembly. And all Israel who were around them fled at their cry, for they said, Lest the earth swallow us up. And the fire came out from the Lord and consumed the 250 men offering the incense. So God does a new thing, and this is the famous story where the earth opens up and swallows these men, these three men, and their families and their servants and all their possessions, and they're taken alive into Sheol, right? So then God tells them to take the censers and hammer the censers out to be a covering for the tabernacle. But now, in chapter 17, before we get to chapter 17, they hammer these censers out. They're made of brass or bronze, and they make a covering for the altar, and then God sends a plague for them against the nation of Israel. And Moses says, Aaron, you go stand between the people and the plague as an intercessor. And he does, and God relents and stops the plague, and 14,000 some odd people perish for this rebellion. Then we come into why Aaron's rod buds. Chapter 17. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the people of Israel, and get from them staffs, one for each father's house, from all their chiefs according to their father's houses, 12 staffs. Write each man's name on his staff, and write Aaron's name on the staff of Levi. For there shall be one staff for the head of each father's house. God has, this is the third rebellion against Aaron as the high priest. So this is the third time that the children of Israel have complained, and the rest of the tribe of Levi have complained that Aaron has been chosen to be the high priest, and God is finally going to put that to bed. He's going to put that to rest. He's going to forever declare before everybody that, yes, I have chosen Aaron to be my high priest, and it is through his loins that the priesthood will come. Right? The rest of the Levites are still going to serve in the temple courts, but they're not going to be priests. Only Aaron's family is going to be priests. That's what this is about. So every head of the 12 tribes were to bring a staff, and they were to engrave their names on a staff and bring it to the tabernacle. Verse 4, Then you shall deposit them in the tent of meeting before the testimony. So Moses was to take them into the Holy of Holies, put them before the Ark of the Covenant. Tent of meeting before the testimony, where I meet with you, and the staff of the man whom I choose shall sprout. Thus I will make to cease from me the grumblings of the people of Israel, when they grumble against you. Moses spoke to the people of Israel, and all their chiefs gave him staffs, one for each chief, according to their fathers' houses. 12 staffs, and the staff of Aaron was among their staffs. And Moses deposited the staff before the Lord in the tent of the testimony. On the next day Moses went into the tent of the testimony, and behold, the staff of Aaron for the house of Levi had sprouted and put forth buds and produced blossoms, and it bore ripe almonds. Then Moses brought out all the staff from before the Lord to all the people of Israel, and they looked, and each man took his staff. And the Lord said to Moses, Put back the staff of Aaron before the testimony to be kept as a sign for the rebels, that you may make an end of their grumblings against me, lest they die. Thus did Moses, and the Lord, as the Lord commanded him, so he did. And the people of Israel said to Moses, Behold, we perish, we are undone, we are all undone. Everyone who comes near to the tabernacle of the Lord shall die, or we all too perish. And then Moses again intercedes for them, so they do not all perish. But this is why we read in Hebrews chapter 9 that the three objects that were left in the Ark of the Covenant were the pot of manna, the 2 tablets of the covenant, the 10 commandments, and Aaron's rod that budded. But it did more than bud. We say Aaron's rod that budded, but it did more than bud. Did you notice that? It not only produced buds, it produced leaves, and it produced fruit, right? Also remember, this is the same rod that we saw as we begin this journey in Exodus that stood for the person of Christ. The miracles that Aaron was to do with the rod, Aaron's rod. Remember when he first goes to Egypt, and God had shown Moses that this rod, you could lay it down, it became a snake, and he can reach down and pick it up, right? That's a shadow and foreteaching of the fact that Christ would become sin for us, right? It's akin to when, as we've seen in John chapter 3, verse 14, as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, so must the Son of Man be lifted up. The Son of Man became sin for us. He became sin on the cross. God poured our punishment out on the man who became sin on the cross so that we might become the righteousness of God. So Aaron's rod stands for the person of Christ and what he would do. He would die as sin, and he would be resurrected, right? Here we see a further teaching on that not only would he be resurrected as a man, which is what the staff stands for. Remember, symbolically, wood talks about the humanity of Christ, and gold in the Exodus, and then this journey talks about the deity of Christ. So the Ark of the Covenant, for instance, is acacia wood covered in gold. So we have a combination of the deity of Christ and the humanity of Christ, fully God and fully man in one person. All of that is bound up in all of this. But this episode, not only is God saying, yes, I have chosen Aaron. He is the one I have chosen. He is the only one I have chosen. It's also teaching us that Christ, in his humanity, would bear these fruits. If you'll recall, when we talked about the lampstand, what people commonly known as the menorah, but the lampstand, if you recall, the cups, the things that held the oil were to be shaped like almond flowers, right? Almond bud, but not almond buds, almond flowers. Now, I don't know, and I probably need to do some more studying, but I don't know why almonds specifically. But I'm sure there's a significance between the almond. I do know this, that almond blooms are white, are very pure white. So white always signifies purity, it signifies holiness. There's more there than I think we can get into on this format. But I just wanted to make sure that we touched all 3 objects that are in the tabernacle, in the Ark of the Covenant. So when you read in Hebrews, Aaron's rod that budded is in the Ark of the Covenant. Now you know why. It was to show that God sovereignly chose Aaron to be the means by which the priesthood would enter into service. Questions, comments?
Pastor, this is Anita.